afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? Good. Afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? Good. All right. My name's Matt Manning. I'm first assistant DA in the DA's office. This is your elected district attorney. And we also have our second assistant DA, Kathy Mills, who really runs everything at the office, who's here with us. We wanted to kind of give you some information on what we need from crime scene. So we try the big cases. We try the murders, the scary stuff you see on TV. Tell you the first thing we need. We need crime scene investigators who have a really, really, really good attention to detail, right? Why do you think that is? Somebody volunteer. Why do you think that is? We need that attention to detail. Yes, ma'am.
They can see things that other people can't.
Right? And what happens when a defense attorney comes in and they're defending their client in that case?
Oh, crash the prosecution.
I'm sorry?
Gonna crash the prosecution.
Crash the prosecution. And they're going to say, you would agree with me, Ms. Smith, that in fact you did not even process his shoes to see if in fact there was a blood trail, right? Yeah. You would agree with me that it's the police department's sole duty to get all of the evidence together to convict my client on these charges, right? You're going to hear a battery of questions like that. So what do we need from a crime scene investigator? We need somebody who is going to have an attention to detail and think about everything. Think about the position of the body. Think about where the position of the wound came. So this is a stab wound, is that correct? All right. For instance, raise your hand if you think I'm a tall guy. Right? Not too many people, right? Here's why that's important. How tall is this man?
At least.
He's taller than you.
Thank you, Captain Obvious. Appreciate that. All right.
He is a scholar.
Okay, here's why I asked that. The reason I asked about his height is because it's important, right? If we want to know where the stab wound came from, we might look at the angle of the stab wound and determine what was the height of the person's the assailant, right? We might say, okay, this is more likely a taller person because the angle of the knife came from above the wound, right? So you would know if I'm on trial, you may have trouble ruling out if I'm the one, you know, or establishing that I'm actually the one who stabbed him if the angle is not consistent with a person of my height, okay? There are obviously a lot of nuances to this. It's not that simple, but those are the kinds of questions that we have to ask ourselves and that we have to be able to substantiate to a jury when we go into a courtroom. So we're always thinking about things like that.
And if I may interject here, though, it definitely starts as soon as officers arrive on the scene.
Right.
Everything that we do, you know, 6 months later, we had a guy that was in jail 1,349 days before we actually went to trial and actually had a case. So that much time has lapsed, right? And so the work that the officers do on the scene is so crucial because we cannot ever go back in time. We don't have time machines where we can say, you know what, officer so-and-so, did you get that piece of evidence? And if they didn't tag this book or dust it for prints and it ended up not getting submitted or analyzed, there's no way we can do it 3 years later. So it's very important that not only we communicate with individuals who are forensically analyzing a crime scene, but also communicate with our officers on the street who do the real work and make sure that everything is collected. Because by the time it gets to our office, it could be too late. And then at the end of the day, we don't get a conviction for something that maybe officers didn't know that we felt was important, then it makes us look like we didn't do our jobs. And ultimately, when you have a victim or a victim's family member, as you would see here, I'm sure he has either he was married by his ring or he has children or anything like that. And it's hard to tell those people, you know what, I'm sorry, we can't get a conviction on a case for these reasons. So it's very important that we are all in unison. We all have to be, and that's one thing about the criminal justice system, right? You can be a part of that spoke in this huge wheel at any point in time, and every part is super important. One cannot exist without the other. And so that's what I would only like to interject is that we cannot do, it's very important that officers at the time that they're here talk to everyone, you know. We saw this person, we saw that person, we subpoenaed their Facebook. Social media guy's gonna kill y'all if you do anything illegal. And your phones, you know, will ping you to where you were. I mean, with technology now, it's super, it's a way to grab a lot of information and present it to a jury. Matt?
Who here has heard about the CSI effect? Raise your hand if you've heard that. Somebody explain it to me. What is the CSI effect?
So pretty much the jury has a hard time not having any scientific data like they see on TV.
so they're less likely to convict someone based on not CSI-esque evidence like fingerprints, DNA, etc.
A round of applause.
Yep. Exactly right.
Very astute answer, but I will say in addition to that, there is also great value to digital evidence. Juries see that as gospel truth now, right? I've prosecuted, 6 murders in the last 6 months?
We just had one, a month ago, where there was a lack of forensic evidence.
Yeah.
And the reason being, the time the individual actually got arrested, it was a year later. So we had no way of getting his phone and dumping it. We had no way of going and pinging any towers to see where he was at in the area, or subpoenaing his Facebook or anything like that.
But here's why I asked about the CSI effect. So I mentioned that to say that juries have an expectation now that crime scene investigators and police departments are going to jump through every single hoop, right? Sometimes it's not practical, and we have to tell juries at the very beginning, like, for instance, gunshot residue. Raise your hand if you heard of gunshot residue, okay? How long after a body or somebody is shot do you have to test for gunshot residue? Instantly. They can wash their hands. Precisely. Right. So when I have a defense attorney saying, you would agree with me, Officer Manning, that you didn't test, my client for gunshot residue, it doesn't matter if it's 8 hours later that we take him into custody, because he could have washed his hands. It doesn't matter, right? Gunshot residue doesn't have any real probative bearing. The reason that's important is because people see TV, and they see on TV what happens. They say, oh, we got a DNA swab. They go to a lab. They test it. They get a response in 1 hour. It says, it's Mark Gonzalez. He's the killer. They go to his house. They take him into custody. He says, yep, I'm the killer. And that's it. In 1 hour, right? That's not real life, y'all. That's not how it works. In real life, the police have to make game time decisions about what they're going to test for and what they are not going to do in their investigations. But the bigger idea is we need to make sure that we jump through all the available hoops, because we want to make sure we preserve as much evidence as possible.
And even if it's going to be fruitless, right? Like, we know that jumping through that hoop is going to get us nothing. Right. We still have to jump through that hoop so we can convey to a jury or even the defense attorney, look, we jumped through that hoop. I can't help that there was nothing there, but we at least did our due diligence and trying to prove our case beyond reasonable doubt, or our burden, or whatever the case may be.
Every single time I prosecute a case, I put before the jury even the things that don't help my case. So if the police do a DNA analysis, for instance, and the DNA does not turn anybody up, I make sure to put it in, because I want the jury to see, well, that investigator actually went through every single step. He got DNA swabs. She got it analyzed, right? Came back, didn't have the assailant on it. But that doesn't matter, because it shows the complexity in the investigation. And that's one thing we find a lot. That's almost what we attacked every time when we were defense attorneys: incomplete investigation. So the CSI effect is very important these days because it controls juries' expectations. People expect to see so much evidence, which is why I say cell phones and digital evidence is so important now. When you send a text, right, what does it mean to slide in somebody's DMs, y'all? Well, everybody's like, I don't want to admit that. Okay, let me ask you this, though, right? When somebody slides in your DMs, are they usually saying the truth about whatever it is they want? Not always, right? Okay, let's say somebody's trying to take you out. That's why they're getting in your DMs. Are they telling the truth about what they want generally? Yes, right? I say that to say this. When juries see text messages on a screen, they're like, that's the truth. And I'll give you an example. I prosecuted a murder, 4 defendants. Prosecuted one of the defendants about, 5 months ago, I guess? And there was a text message that he sent to his wife that said, I got her into this. I think it's only right we look after her. We're going to keep her at the house for a while. And his wife responded with this. She said, how the F did you get her into this? You didn't put a gun to her head. Y'all was on some gangster stuff. She wanted to prove to you that she wasn't a punk. What do you think if you hear that text message and you're on a jury? And that's sent 2 days after the murder. What do you think if you hear that text message? What do you think? What are they talking about? Don't be shy. They kill somebody, right? And not only did they kill somebody, 2 people were involved, right? And they both did it of their own volition, right? And they were referencing, well, I didn't tell you this part, but they were referencing the other defendant in the prior text messages. So if you hear that circumstantially, what do you think? You're talking about the person you killed together. That's why it's so compelling. So what we need is crime scene investigators that are going to realize that every single part of the crime scene is important. Every single part has to be analyzed.
And the other thing too is that nothing happens overnight. To dump a cell phone, unless it's a very high priority, it can take months. Any analyzation of any DNA type of submissions can take typically about 6 to 9 months before we get a lot of that stuff back. Because the labs that we have to work with and send our stuff through typically are DPS and they're accredited labs. We can always contract with other labs, and most of them that we would contract with would be accredited, but then that often comes to at a cost, and then we have to incur that cost also. And so those are some of the things that you have to consider as to, when people say, well, why is this case taking so long? Why is somebody in jail for 1,329 days until it goes to trial? Is because we have to do all those steps before we actually go forward with the case.
That's correct. Also, what's very, very important is crime scene preservation. So I'm sure there's been conversation about that, but that's one of the things we also see in our cases. There has to be a detailed log of who made contact with the crime scene first, right? How the crime scene was contained. One of the things I always do when I'm prosecuting a case is I ask the responding officer, Officer Jenkins, right? What did you do to ensure that the crime scene was contained? Because here's why that's important. If it's a shooting, for instance, what might they be looking for? Casings, right? So, casings. We're looking for casings. You might be looking for
unless
projectiles.
It's a revolver, and casings don't eject from a revolver.
Exactly.
So if there's testimony that I saw the gun and it looked like the old timies that spent, then you know right away you're probably not going to have casings at a murder scene.
Right. Did you have a comment, ma'am?
I said unless they're stupid and dumping.
And a lot of them are.
Yeah.
They are?
I mean, because you wouldn't risk some of the things they risk for, the reward that they think they're getting. So, but it is what it is.
They used to be the biggest killer for me. I'd get a client when I was in private practice, and they would find the bloody shoes at his house. I'm like, bro, really? How are you surrounded by water and you don't throw them in? I don't get it. I'm not suggesting that.
Mark and Matt will go on forever.
Yeah, we will. So I know how much time we have. We talk for hours, but Kathy.
But I did want to introduce myself. I've got business cards. We love having student interns. So if you're interested in coming and seeing part of it, visit me after, and I'll make sure to give you my information. You can email me. We let y'all intern throughout the year. We let you intern during summertime. It's unpaid, unfortunately, but it's a great opportunity. Nothing pays like experience.
And we've had actual students who have worked in our office for a couple months, and then that led to employment either with CPS, probation department, and then people that have gone from here, like myself, and then obviously go to law school and become attorneys. So
the last thing though, if you intern with us, it will not be just grunt work pushing paper. We actually have you get involved with strategy, with working things up. We want you to lead with substantive skills. So if you want to work with us, come. We will really give you an opportunity, and we'll help kind of hone some of those skills. Any questions real quick before we yield the floor?
We're on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat.
They're not committing any crime, so they're fully.
Don't slide in my DMs though.
All right, guys. We will talk in just a little bit about some of the things you can learn in the classroom about working the scene, and about the Constitution, and about some of the other factors that you've heard here, because different faculty members here teach all of these elements. So we'll go through that. But before we do, the next thing I think we should do in the interest of our poor victim here, who's been laying for a while, is to let you guys look at the scene. If you can actually walk underneath the tape, just make sure that you don't, I don't think you can get blood on your feet, but just make sure you're not tracking that anywhere. So take a look at that. The other thing that you're going to have is if you turn this direction, you will see a group of people who've been taped off. These poor individuals. These individuals would be the individuals at the scene who were separated from the scene when we got here. So they would have been at the scene when the officers arrived. You can talk to them, you can interview them, you can ask them questions. But what we should do, probably given the crowd's eyes, is work. So wander around this way on the tape and come down the line in this direction. So there'll be somebody helping you out there. Come down the line in this direction and talk to them. We taped them off just because, so you could remember who they were, quite frankly. But anyway, nonetheless, and then after we're done with that, we will let our victim get up, and then you and I and the rest of the faculty here at least, and possibly some of the experts, will talk a little bit about who you picked, which one of these individuals you picked as the individual that did it, and why, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the evidence that could have maybe led you on the right track or the wrong track. Obviously, it would take more time and it's a longer process if we were doing this in the real world, but nonetheless, for now, we'll do it this way, right? All right, so begin to do that.
Don't forget, don't feed the animals.
Yeah, don't feed anybody. Don't pet them, they bite.
Chair to chair. You feel like asking your witness so bad.